Peace, family. It's your brother Marc Lamont Hill. You're welcoming. You're welcoming. You're being welcomed to the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. I'm here, actually in Washington D.C. in the office of Al Jazeera, which is why I look like this and why my background looks like this. But I wanted to make sure that early in the day, rather than later in the day, I give you some updates on what's going on in the war on Gaza. So as I write to you from the nation's capital, I want to make sure that I hear from y'all as well. Make sure you drop in your location, drop in your city, drop in your state, drop in your country, drop in where you're coming in from, because we want to send shouts out to everybody who's out here. Of course, Montier Elliott writing in, shout out to you. You got this, brother. We got Stephanie Marquez, who's MLH family. Always a pleasure to see my sister here. Shout out to you. We got people writing in like Savita from New Jersey, Abe from NYC, wa alaikum salam, Nuseba from Philadelphia. Got to shout out my Philly people. Always a pleasure and honor to see y'all in the building. People calling all the way from Kuwait, Musa El Ghanim, writing in from Kuwait and so forth and so on. Minneapolis in the building. Shout out to y'all as well. Shout out to Moni, where she at in the middle. We got Nael Aklile from New York. We got Seriela de Puerto Rico. Está presente. Hola, ¿cómo estás? We got Vanessa Marshall from BK, JB from North Carolina, and so forth and so on. So everybody, we are here because tragically, we have reached day 131 of Israel's war on Gaza. As much as we continue to resist, as much as we continue to fight, the Israeli government continues to prosecute a vicious assault, not in Gaza, not against Hamas exclusively or even primarily, but against the Palestinian people and against the people of Gaza in particular. And so every single day, as promised, we're going to give you updates from Gaza or on Gaza. We're going to do what corporate media refuses to do. We're going to do what mainstream outlets have refused to do, which is to tell the raw, unvarnished truth about what's happening in the Gaza Strip right now. I often begin with the numbers, and I begin with the numbers because the numbers are so stark. They're so stunning. They're so devastating. And they put into context exactly what's happening here. Since October 7th, 28,576 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. 28,576 Palestinians have been killed. Another 68,291 have been wounded. That means that we are very close to a total of 100,000 people who have been killed or wounded in Gaza. That number, when you look at the 2.2 million population, we're basically approaching 5% of Gaza. 1 out of 20 people has been killed or wounded. I mean, these are the types of numbers that stretch credulity if we weren't on the ground seeing it happen all. And when I say we, I mean journalists, I mean reporters, I mean people who live there, people who are humanitarian aid workers, people who simply have access to cameras. We see the numbers: 28,576 dead, 68,291 have been injured. By the way, the death toll in Israel since October 7th, it stands at 1,139. You remember it started at 1,800, then dropped to 16 and 14 and 12, and now 1,139. So when I say the numbers are stark, I'm talking about the contrast between the number of Palestinians who've been killed and the number of Israelis who've been killed. Ideally, for me, we'd be in a situation where no one is killed, where we could reach a diplomatic solution. But because there have been no red lines since October 7th, because there have been no limits placed on Israeli action by the Israeli government, by the war cabinet, by representatives, because there's been no commitment to restraint of arms, purity of arms, restraint, all these things that have historically been self-identified with the Israeli military. What we've seen instead is an all-out assault on Gaza, an all-out, full-throated devastation of the Gaza Strip. And last night, was no exception. If you look at Nasser Hospital, dozens of people um, were trapped inside of Nasser Hospital, and they fled last night during deadly sniper attacks. Um, this is, again, not uncommon. If you look at Nasser Hospital, Al Ahli Hospital, Al Amal Hospital, Al Shifa Hospital, hospitals all around the region have been the victims of sieges, bombardments. People have been trapped in the hospital and can't leave. Sick people have been trapped outside the hospital and can't get in. This type of situation is compounded by the extraordinary violence that's taking place around the perimeter of the hospital. So hospitals, which are supposed to be safe zones, they're supposed to be protected spaces, they no longer are protected spaces. And that is what we end up seeing with Nasser Hospital. And so the Israeli forces ordered hundreds of people to evacuate. Ordering hundreds of people to evacuate a hospital is no small matter. And while it sounds like it's an act of fairness and justice to say, "Oh well, just evacuate the hospital," shout out to you, H.R. Harris. One, love you, appreciate the generous donation. It's much harder to do, and it's even harder when the area becomes increasingly dense, and when people can't move around, and when people um, can't access transportation and the communications devices are struck down. That's what we're seeing right now in Gaza right now. Another thing that we've seen is the attack on journalists. In the last 48 hours, we've seen journalists killed, we've seen journalists severely wounded, we've seen 2 journalists placed in critical condition. In fact, the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, condemned the Israeli drone attack that hit 2 journalists in Gaza, leaving both of them in critical condition. Since the war on Gaza began, we've seen a journalist killed almost every day on average. We've seen a journalist killed almost every day on average. Journalists are not being protected. They're not being directed to safe corridors. They're not being deemed non-combatants. Instead, they are being treated like combatants. And the Israeli government, again, has stretched its definitions of Hamas affiliation. They've stretched their connection of terrorist ties. They've stretched their analysis of folk in such a way that after they killed many of these journalists, they then tried to tell the world that the journalists were killed because they weren't actually journalists, but they were terrorist actors. I mean, this is the type of tragedy we've seen. And many of those people have been my colleagues right here at Al Jazeera. Many of them have been my colleagues right here at Al Jazeera. So I am particularly and especially devastated and struck by the amount of journalists who've been killed. Yeah. Another thing that we've seen a lot of is tension, not just tension, we've seen gunfire, we've seen bombings, we've seen intense violence at the southern Lebanese border. This is something that started as a tension that emerged and became a diplomatic matter, but very quickly went from a diplomatic matter to an incredibly violent matter. And in fact, today, at this very moment, Wednesday, February 14th, we've seen a new peak in violence where casualties on both sides, the Israeli side and the Lebanese side, or the Hezbollah side, have been, we've seen a high number of casualties on both sides. So this is not a small thing. And those numbers are also going up. The world community right now is speaking up and speaking out. We are seeing increasingly high numbers of people who are expressing their outrage, not just at what's happening in Gaza broadly, but people who very specifically, very specifically are pointing to the proposed ground operation in Rafah as a non-starter, as a tactical and moral non-starter. I'll give you an example. France's President Macron said that he opposes the Israeli assault on Rafah. He said this could only lead to a humanitarian catastrophe of a new magnitude and to forced displacement of populations, which would constitute violations of international human rights and bring additional risk of regional escalation. This is what he said to Netanyahu on the phone. And it makes sense. You have 2.2 million people all scattered throughout the Gaza Strip. Then you move half of them down to an area, Rafah, where you're only supposed to have 200,000 people, and you have them in a dense circumstance. You take away their homes, you take away their resources, you take away food, you take away water, you take away electricity, you take away telecommunications capacity. And then after you do all of that, you then say, we're going to invade. You need to get out. You need to go to Gaza City. You need to go north. You need to go to 20 kilometers north. You need to take this pathway. And all the pathways are also littered with violence. There is absolutely no legitimate argument for a ground invasion right now in Rafah, when the entire world, even your staunchest allies, are saying that this will cause a humanitarian catastrophe, violate international law, and maybe make you vulnerable to legitimate charges of genocide. So even the people who deny Israeli genocide already, even the people who have protected and shielded Israel from international rebuke, they're saying, look, if you do this, you might really be doing genocide. And yet Netanyahu continues not to listen. Pope Francis, this is important, right? The Israeli embassy to the Holy See has denounced remarks from a deputy Pope, Francis, who decried the carnage of the war in Gaza. So let me give you context. Yesterday, the Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, stated that, quote, requests that Israel's right to defense, which has been invoked to justify this operation, be proportional. And certainly with 30,000 deaths, it is not. I believe we are all outraged by what is happening, by this carnage, but we must have the courage to move forward and not lose hope. So, you know, when you have the Pope's leadership, the Pope's staff, the Pope's spokespeople saying that this is carnage and that this is not proportionate and that this is awful, when you have all of that being said, again, you think that that would move people. Instead, the Israeli embassy said it's a deplorable statement, judging the legitimacy of a war without taking into account all relevant circumstances and data inevitably leads to wrong conclusions. Now, it's hard to say that the Pope or that the Catholic Church is anti-Semitic or that they're involved in a political conspiracy. I mean, it's harder to levy those things against them the way you would say the UN. But nonetheless, Israel is consistent in saying, we don't care what the world thinks. The world is wrong. The world is wrong. A couple quick shouts out. Bullet the Bunny said, can I connect you to Dr. Abu Warda? He's a surgeon at Shifa 104 left. His story needs to be told. Absolutely. Please make that connection. I want to talk to everybody who's at Al Shifa or any of the hospitals to get their story about what's going on. Allahumma ameen. Musa, thank you so much for the generous donation. Thank you so much for showing love to the channel. We appreciate you. And that goes to everybody who's made a super sticker, a super chat, a super whatever. We love it. We appreciate it. We're so grateful. Musa, thank you so much. Montier Elliott, same to you. You've been very generous, very, very generous lately. And we're so grateful for your support of the channel. We only survive with the support of the community, and you all are making it happen. I want to just go through a couple more quick things before we roll out, because I got to jump back on air to prepare for Friday's Al Jazeera show, which I want to make sure y'all watch. Got some important people on the show on Friday. I don't want to say who it is yet, but we got two important voices who will really articulate why the crisis in Gaza is what it is, as well as how that crisis is impacting life on the ground here for Muslims, for Palestinians, for Arabs. We're going to talk about all of that. All right. The permanent representative of the State of Palestine to Arab League, Mohammed El Aklouk, has announced the State of Palestine called for holding an extraordinary session of the council on Thursday. That's according to El Wafa. They said the call comes in light of the ongoing crime of genocide committed by Israel against the Palestinian people, especially as Palestinians in Rafah, where more than 1.4 million people are displaced, are bracing for a potential military offensive. Israeli forces just killed a Gaza political analyst, someone who is a welcomed and frequent guest on Al Jazeera, my network. Israeli forces killed Ayman Rafati. They also killed his wife, They also killed his children. They did so by shelling his home, which is north of Gaza City. That's according to Euromed Human Rights Monitors head Rami Abdul. Uh, According to Abdul, Israel has been silencing the voices of Gaza, while others have said that it's part of an ongoing scholasticide, which means that Israel is not just killing um, political prisoners. Israel's not just destroying infrastructure. Israel is also killing um, Gaza's education system. And that's something that we have to honestly talk about. The Israeli army has previously killed poets, they've killed professors, they've killed academics, they've killed 100 journalists. These are not coincidences. All right. All right, y'all. We got so much more to talk about. We'll cover more later tonight. We'll get into some specific stories and some specific bills, some specific policies that have emerged lately that we need to talk about. In the meantime, though, I want to thank you all for watching the channel. I want to shout out Marv for a generous donation. I'm so grateful to everything you do every single day as a community to support me. And Marv is one of those people. And Toba Mansouri, thank you so much for your generous donation. It is appreciated. It is welcomed. Again, I'm grateful. We're going to be out here every single day telling the story of what's going on in Gaza. We're not going to stop. They're trying to stop us. They're trying to shadow ban the channel. They're trying to erase our viewership. They're trying to not notify people when the lives happen. We see it on all the platforms, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. But we keep going. We keep fighting. So it's important for all of you all to be as close to the channel as possible. That means hit the like button. Let them algorithms know that we will not be moved. Hit the subscribe button. When you hit the subscribe button, it expands our reach in our network. Of course, hit the join button if you can. We'd be so grateful if somebody today would just join the channel. If you hit the join button, joining means that you pay $4.99, I believe, a month for a bronze level membership, or you can go all the way up to diamond level, whichever you choose. But the point is, we would love for you to have a monthly financial connection to the channel, not just for money, although the money helps fund us, but also so that you can be part of what we're building and growing and expanding right here. And if you want, you can make a direct donation to the channel by going to Cash App and just going MLHTV, $MLHTV. No amount is too small. Even $1 goes a long way to helping us build the infrastructure for radical conversation, for political education, and for a complete departure from mainstream corporate media project. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're going to keep doing. So we appreciate you. We thank you. Keep watching, keep supporting. Check out all the new content that's coming out today. And I'll talk to you soon. Peace.